Welcome to this first edition of EdUp Insights, where innovators and thought leaders meet. We consider the future. We really think about what's possible. I'm your host, Chuck Ambrose. I'm grateful to kind of be assuming the host role. And our goal really is to have future-facing conversations, engage with you as listeners, but more importantly, hear from thought leaders and innovators who are really thinking about what's possible, especially what's possible if we keep our focus on the things that matter most for college. And Insights is available on all major streaming outlets. It's powered by Hush Blackwell Consulting. There will be a YouTube channel to stream into. Be sure to subscribe, share, and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you because literally the future of higher education starts right now. And it starts with my first guest on Ed Insights, Sara Goldrick-Rab. Sara, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Not only thanks for joining, but I have to confess right up front, Sara, if I'm going to think about what's next, and we have to acknowledge that we are friends and thought partners, that someone who I would check in with and have a perspective about what's best for students is you. And so I'm really humbled for you to join. And I've got to ask because, again, we probably haven't had this opportunity to have this conversation. Listeners may just want to know your journey, right? And what college means to you and kind of what lit that spark. But again, I want to just welcome you, and then we'll talk a little bit about all those things that you've done along the way.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, I really appreciate I like how you're framing this about the future. I think it is so important that we continue to remember that life is long and that our sector has been around for a very long time as well. I think a lot of people say life is short, you got to go fast. And I used to think that. And I think it's wrong. I think we have to remember, I mean, we've been through a lot of tough moments. Higher education's been through a lot of changes. And we're going to keep going through changes. And it's important that we kind of remind ourselves about why we're doing what we're doing. So, I did not plan to become a professor. I did not necessarily plan to become a researcher. I am just somebody who, growing up thought that it was important to, I wanted for other people what I had received for myself. In terms of opportunities. I understood something about inequality. I think from a pretty young age, I grew up in a very, very wealthy county in Virginia, Fairfax County. And I was very fortunate to be put into gifted programming. And in fact, not just one of those pull-out programs, but my whole school was a gifted school. And I was bused and I was showered with resources and I was educated only around people with really high test scores and so on. And so I really got to see what segregation looked like kind of right up front. And I could see that we were being pushed towards college and other people weren't. I could see that the kids who grew up the way that my grandfather grew up in the Bronx. My grandfather, grew up with very, very little money in his family. Most of his siblings didn't go to college. They went in the military. But his journey in the military led to him being able to go to college thanks to the GI Bill. And so I could see that the way that was just a stroke of almost luck for him was not happening for other kids in Fairfax County, who weren't getting the largesse that I was getting. So anyway, that angered me. And I think I've always kind of just held on to this idea that I have a role to play. If I'm going to reap the benefits of all that well-resourced education, other people should get some of those benefits.
Yeah, well, and
Right?
you've just really touched a couple things that stand out. I hate to say that I consider elder status, but wisdom would say that even though life is in some terms short, um, what we make of it, right? You do have to take that longer view, and
Mhm.
you know, I think that's so important and critical what you said about higher ed. But you've shared in other forums something that your granddad shared with you that may, in some ways, kind of lead you to sociology, which I don't know if you knew, but we share as an undergraduate, at
Mhm.
least, experience. Do you want to talk about that for a minute, just about kind of that sense of responsibility to care for others and
Yeah, I mean, he you know, I'm so lucky he's still around. He's turning 98 like in a
oh
couple.
my,
I know, and he's still got it. Like I mean, he's fully there and he lives autonomous. Like he lives on his own. I mean, and he works. Like it's really incredible. So, if you really want to understand like where we've been, I've got my own,
living
historian,
right
right?
journey,
But
right?
everybody in my family has lived some sort of life of service, is I guess what I would say. We're always trying to make things better. And I think it's because both him and my grandmother spoke all the time, right? About just the importance of that you don't, you just can't take anything for granted. And if you get, you've got to give, right? And I've seen that in so many ways. And he spoke about that power of what college did for him. He spoke about it all the time. It's probably way more than most people have college conversations in their life. I probably had them by the time I was 10, in him telling me that, you know, getting that education has allowed him to have a career that he loved. It allowed him to convince my grandmother to marry him. Because my grandmother was actually pretty darn educated, and her parents were pretty darn educated. She wouldn't have looked at a boy who didn't have some of that, right? So I've just always understood it as not something that we should gatekeep. And frankly, it's one of the things that has concerned me about higher ed is, I mean, let's just take the word, right? I wish that we didn't actually think higher ed meant better than other people ed, right? In that way. I've never understood it that way. It's the next step on the ladder. It's the next set of things that you're learning. And so he talks to me about college as just another place to deepen your understanding of things or to explore. It's just more time to read. It's more time to think. It's more time to be with other people. It's not that you get to rub elbows with people who are better than others.
Right.
It's never been about that. It's not about the clubbiness. I want to be clear. I wasn't taught about how he was in a frat. Do you know what I mean? Or I wasn't taught about how we're going to go back and then you're going to go to the same school I went to because that legacy is the thing. It wasn't about those privileges. It was about the worlds that he got exposed to and the things that he was able to think about. And I'll just say this, when she was quite, advanced in age, my grandmother, because she lived in New York City, just decided just continue going to school. Right? She already had a degree from Northwestern. She was a published author. And yet I heard her saying, I'm going over to this school to listen to a lecture, which said to me, this is about learning, right? This is about being in the room and listening to somebody that is helping to open your mind to new ideas. So that's the version of all of this work that I think is so important. And she always talked about the teacher. And I want to land on that because she said teacher, by the way. I don't love the word professor. I really have started to just call myself a teacher because it's the act of the teaching and the learning to me that is the core of our why. And it requires those humans.
Yeah, and that why, right? I mean, I hesitated to use the future of college versus our shared responsibility kind of for future of learning, right?
But
Wherever
it
and
is.
however students learn.
Right, we framed it around college, and I'm not one of those people that just says, "Oh, we can just get rid of that," or I would never write a book called "The End of College." That's not the point, right? These are labels that we use, and yes, they are organizing tools. I mean, right? We know that as sociologists, right? Like we create organizations to embody and represent ideas, but the basic idea is simply that learning doesn't end with high school, and that we need places to continue that learning.
Even well beyond, as you're saying, right? Our own experiences right now as learners, right? I mean, that's kind of what this podcast is about.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
had
and this
some
is typical.
contrasts, Sarah, between your granddad's journey, right, and your own, right? Because
Yeah, there's a lot of differences. I mean, this is one of the things that we know also as sociologists, right? Which is that the benefits that come with the college education are intergenerational. So, so he took that opportunity from the GI Bill. He went to school and he raised a family. And with my grandmother, I want to be very clear, my grandmother was definitely a feminist. There's two people in that. But all of the children went to school. In fact, two of the children went to an Ivy League institutions, right? But my mother went on and got a doctorate in education. And all of the grandchildren have gone to, higher education. And of course, I'm the first one to become a professor. Um, but I will say, even though I had the family advantages around, I knew I was going to school and I prepared like I was going to school, I did not have as much financial security as one might need to make it a painless experience. And in particular, I share the experience with the middle class, which is to say, it didn't qualify for need-based aid, but we didn't have enough because I'm in full disclosure, right? I started college in 1995. College prices were rising. It wasn't as if we could just afford it out of pocket. So I worked my way through college and I learned a lot about Papa and I talk a lot about the fact that I didn't get to spend a ton of time on big ideas. I did spend time on sociology, I want to be clear, but I didn't get to spend a lot of time just enjoying life because I was either studying in the classroom or I was working as a waitress to pay for studying in the classroom.
right. And did you have to assume loans?
I didn't, and I'm lucky. And the reason that this is going to blow your mind, I probably would have ended up with loans if I had stayed at my first college, William and Mary. But William and Mary as a place didn't make me happy. I felt very isolated. It's very far from an urban area. So I transferred to George Washington University, not because it was really an academic fit for me, frankly, but because my mother was an adjunct there. And this is what's going to blow your mind. I got free tuition.
Wow.
So, so my working was to finance my living, but my tuition was free. If I hadn't had free tuition, I absolutely would have ended up with loans.
Yeah.
And of course, adjuncts, and I adjunct now at a community college, having been a tenured professor, there's no world in which adjuncts children would get free tuition. So I graduated from this institution that I think people think of as very expensive and fancy. That wasn't why I was there, but I made good use of it.
Isn't that interesting? I was thinking generationally, I was right in that early stages of the shift from grants to loans.
Yeah,
Affordability wasn't quite the issue, Sarah, because college
yeah,
costs hadn't started to escalate quite as your generation. But that access point, right, is one of those first responsibilities of kind of not just paying it forward, right, of the value
yeah.
of learning. Um, and how was there anybody in that undergraduate experience that you kind of look back to, other students who were working or
Mhm.
were really in the struggle that kind of you look back to and say, well, that was part of my activation?
Well, I think two things. I mean, first was, when you just said, college costs weren't what they were at that time. I want to note the other thing that wasn't like what it was then was rent, right? So we don't say enough about how rent is a major college cost. So
Right.
one of the big things that happened to me very early on was that my housing situation was uncommonly precarious because originally GW told me I would live for free on campus. And they started letting me live for free. And about several months in, they said, oh no, you can't actually do that because you get free tuition. You got to leave. And so I was thrust very rapidly into the off campus housing market, and it was extremely expensive. And I had a series of really negative experiences related to that, which taught me a lot. The other thing, though, that taught me a ton was that I was late to register because I transferred, right? And the major classes were all closed. So the only classes that they could put me into were honors courses, and typically you take one at a time. I took four at a time because um, because then nothing else was open. So I ended up in a class, a sociology class, with an amazing woman named Ruth Wallace, who used to be a nun, who became a sociologist. And I was one of only four students. So I actually had one of those experiences where you sit in a classroom
Wow.
with an
Yep.
esteemed teacher and you read the great books and you have all the attention. Do you know what I mean? Like the real, so I really thrived even as a first year, second semester student. And it's Ruth who really turned me into a sociologist. And it became very clear that you could use sociology to advance change in the world. And I really understood the human connection part that I was getting, and I wanted everybody to have that. What Ruth gave me was tremendous. And it's not a coincidence. The only donation I've ever made to a college that wasn't a community college was a donation that I made to GW when Ruth passed to start an emergency fund for sociology students in her name, especially sociology students raising children,
Yeah.
right? Because
Wow.
she would have loved that. But,
Right.
you see, like, again, we go back to there's these humans and what they need to do, and what's fundamental is the learning, not all the other stuff that was going on. Remember, I was at GW during Stephen Joel Trachtenberg's era.
Yeah.
It was about everything but that, right? It was about growth and it was about expansion, and he was buying up half of Washington. But the fundamental underneath it, and the reason that I did learn so much there was that just by that terrible thing that we talk about all the time, not getting courses, I actually ended
Right.
up in great courses.
Just a very practical means, right, of moving a
Right.
barrier, right?
Yeah, and
Wow.
I'm just lucky that I was, and I will say this, talk about privilege. If I hadn't gone to such a rigorous high school, those four honors courses would have been the end of me,
Yeah.
right? I was just so well prepared that even though they were hard, they were really hard, I could handle that load because I had been more than adequately prepared.
Yeah. Well, and I just as you have drawn our attention to basic needs,
Mhm.
I was a minister's son. My mom was a nurse anesthetist, and worked in South Philadelphia, right?
Oh,
And grew up in Cherry Hill,
oh,
and would have considered that same privilege, but um, never a question, right, of whether you were going to college. Uh,
right.
my question was I prepared for college,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so my bumps came early, especially in calculus and a few other things. I just wasn't ready.
Yeah, no, and that's I mean we know that, but like we know and we've known for a long time that the academic component is really big and we are still not fixing it, right? The fact I'm going to give you a quick example. My son is a first year at Pitt right now, and I wasn't sure how it would go because he went to a Philadelphia public high school that wasn't, it was good, but it wasn't one of the, premier whatever. Um, but I think one of the smartest things and that we did that I'm so glad I did was I made him take math all the way through high school, including his senior year. Well, he has a fellow friend who's really struggling in community college right now because she didn't take math her junior or senior years of high school. She sat for that placement exam. You know what happened. And to me, it's the combination of the preparation on the academics, but also it has a huge financial consequence, right?
Yeah,
Because
right.
she now has to take classes that don't qualify for financial aid. It's going to take her longer to get through. And she also keeps saying, "What do you mean it's not a college course?" She's in remedial, right, education. So, and I explained it to her because I met with her and I said, life is really weird like this, but the only reason Connor knew, like he didn't want to take math his senior year. The reason that he knew is because this is what I do for a living. That can't be the world that we live in. Like that cannot be what we require of people. You have to have a mom, right, who has an expertise in higher ed in order to successfully go to college. That's ridiculous. That's a
Well, that does
policy
sound like
failure.
it's helping you be a better first semester mom. I'm just saying,
Oh,
right?
listen, I think so many people in our field who've watched my career have said to me, "You talk a lot, but if you're really going to walk your talk, try to apply those lessons when your own kid goes." And
Right.
I appreciate their skepticism, but I do want you to know I've walked all of my talk so far, including I did
I
not
bet
like
you
it.
have.
I
Yep.
drew a hard line around college choice. He was not allowed to consider places that I consider frankly, money I wouldn't spend. I said to him, he named a few schools that I'm sure our colleagues all think that children of mine would want to go to. And I said, I'd rather set a pile of money on fire. I would. Because here's the thing. His life is going to turn out the same with or without that school. And I am not going to throw away 300 grand, right? Paying for his life to not be changed and for him to go into a learning environment where, let's be really frank about it, there's a lot less variation in who he'll be with. I don't want him to go be in a homogenous environment. I
No,
want him to learn
right,
with people, right? Pitt's
right.
not perfect. Pitt's not his Philly public school, but I'll tell you what, it's it's a good state institution and it still costs way too much, but you know,
Well,
he's not
you're right
sitting
where
there
every parent
jaded.
is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got a refined sense of value, right? And you asserted that as a parent,
Yeah,
and
and I told him this means when your roommate doesn't have enough to eat, I have a way to help. I've got cash.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I said this to him, your life is going to be better, not just because of things we do for you, but because of the things that we do for your friends and people you don't even know in your community, because we all live together, right?
right,
He
yeah.
does not his safety, even basic public safety, does not just depend on his educational attainment, it depends on the educational attainment of the young people he lives around.
Right. And so, again, not a faculty member, not a center director, but a parent, right? Thinking about value in such a powerful
Yeah.
way. I got to ask you a question, Sarah, because this is somewhat confessional as a longtime president, right? Who always considered student-centeredness, success, primary responsibility. Understood, probably because of some of the things that we were both, exposed to as sociologists, right? In terms of extending that privilege and what it meant for those, especially differential, right? On mobility on almost every measure. A degree matters.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but how did you focus on basic needs? Because as a president, again, you probably uh, relieved a blind spot that I had
Mhm.
at a level that wasn't really considered by the field until things like Hope for College.
Mhm.
How did you find that?
So the thing is, structurally speaking, presidents are going to have a hard time finding these things because you are positioned at a point in the structure that is so far, right, removed from the daily student experience that it's harder unless you do really intentional things. You're not going to detect what's happening on the ground, right? You have too many layers of people between you. So the short answer is I learned by talking to and listening to people.
And
That's
students,
literally
right? Students
students.
probably
I mean, literally students. That's what I mean.
students, right?
If I wanted to understand, I mean, there were I was in as a young professor, I was brought into what I'm going to call fancy rooms, right? I was at a top-notch Research One institution and I got invited to all kinds of conversations, whether it was, the Institute for Higher Ed Policy or whether it was the American Enterprise Institute or whoever it was. I was in all kinds of conversations. And I heard people talk about students. And I heard people talk about the things that they thought, about why they weren't finishing or what was going on, right? And the stories they were telling, I don't know. I had concerns. I had doubts. I really wanted to know. I think it was the scientist in me. Like, are these stories accurate? Like, if the story is that financial aid makes college affordable, then why is it that so many people say it's still not? And I was lucky that because of a research study that I got some funding for, that I had the opportunity to just go ask very basic questions. And the most basic question that we asked of students is, how are you? And that's where you find things out, right? Because you don't tell, I didn't say, how affordable does college feel to you? I didn't say, how's your Pell Grant treating you, right? Or, right, how are you? And when you ask them how they are and you listen to what's really going on in their lives, we started to learn about not having enough to eat. We started to learn about not having a reliable place to sleep. And then I knew that if I walked back into any fancy room, I would be told that I was just telling an anecdote unless I subjected it to scientific protocols, which I was taught how to do, right? Then we did the science part. And then I was facing the really god awful truth, which is that the field was missing something. And now I had to begin to not only publish my scientific papers, which is honestly the part I cared the least about, but I had to go tell people and I had to get them to believe me. And, you know, that was hard. I used the media. One of the ways that I got to presidents like yourself, one of the ways I got to build what was the Hope Center for College Community and Justice, right, was by going to the media and telling them what I had learned. And when you all see stuff in the paper, right, if you see it in Inside Higher Ed, then you start maybe asking some of these questions. And then I had to convince you all to go and, right, and you were willing way before lots of other people to like say, okay, is that on my campus? And the long and short of it is, it's on everybody's campus. Everybody. There is not a college or university in the country, online or otherwise, who does not have basic needs and security, whether or not they are doing anything to address it. And I'm going to tell you right now, having a food pantry does not count as addressing basic needs and security. Having financial aid does not count as addressing basic needs and security. These are not the things to check off. I mean, you have to have them, but that's not the measure. It's true. And you can deny it or you can lean into it. And if you want to lean into it, I promise you, you will have a healthier campus community and you will have more graduates.
Yeah, and you know, again, the missing link for me, and I think you would recognize this. I did listen to students, and I had a heavy heart for their needs. I think what you helped me with was the systemic and somewhat structural response, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think some of our structure was always at a level of basic need that really didn't get down to what students were experiencing, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, just to be really clear, like I have never been asking administrators to hire a ton of social workers and deploy them all over their institution. Like
Right.
I understand. I studied higher ed finance before I studied basic needs. Like I do get it. You know, most places can't do that. Do I wish they could? Sure.
Sure.
But let's be clear. I'm asking like right now, right? Even in this terrible moment that we're in financially in higher ed and where we might be headed, I'm asking you to consider, for example, that the energy that you put into helping students do the FAFSA, that you might put a little of that energy into telling them that SNAP may very well also help them pay for college.
Or Medicaid. I mean,
Or Medicaid,
yeah,
right?
I've,
You name it, right?
you've called that out.
Right, exactly. And so here's the thing. I mean, there are people who are enrolled in our institutions who, if they did one of these applications, could access another $3,000 or $4,000 in support a year. Who are we to only talk to them about the FAFSA? Especially when we know that after the FAFSA, they're going to face net prices. I mean, I would love to quiz the inner circles of the think tanks and see how many folks who are pontificating about the future of higher ed know that the net price of attending community college in the United States now exceeds $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
Net
Wow.
price.
Right.
Okay, if you don't know that fact and you're not grappling with the fact that there is no world in which the average community college student can handle 15K a year out of pocket, then we're not focused on what matters.
Well, back in 2016, I think you said 20% of students were hungry in
Mhm.
community colleges and like 13% were homeless.
Yeah, it was closer to almost half on our hunger estimates were really high. You're right on the 13% for homelessness. You're right. I will tell you the federal data. This is what the federal data now tell us. So the feds have bothered to ask these questions exactly once, and it took them a decade of convincing them to do it. Sorry if I sound a little frustrated. um, the federal numbers say 24% for food insecurity and 8% for homelessness.
Okay.
However, it's a very narrow point in time assessment on a single survey. And I worry. I always worry that we're undercounting because, to be honest, students that are struggling to make ends meet are not the first ones to go do surveys. So, while those numbers certainly show a lower number than I showed, two things. One, I think they're underestimates. And two, it doesn't really matter. If it's a quarter or half of your students, you still have to have these services. And so to me, the opening of the conversation was, hey, there's a thing you need to be doing and you got to start doing it.
Yeah, which, and just thinking about our conversation, Sarah, you start thinking there's things that we have to do, right?
Mhm.
There's certain headwinds of policy and funding and
Mhm.
political social divide that are upending, right?
Mhm.
Those supports. I mean, I think
Yep.
about programs like Trio and McNair, and you just
Yep.
run the
Yep.
gamut, which, those are frontline leaders who do listen to students and
Yep.
engage with them, in their livelihood. What this inflection point, you just said it's going to really require us to reallocate what we have.
I completely agree. And we got to get real about it now.
Uh,
So listen, I mean, I'm talking to all kinds of institutions that I got to tell you, I think in a year or 2 years are going to have seen a very sharp reduction in the number of staff, right? Particularly, I hate to say it, but in support staff. And they cannot stop providing these services. So, what are they supposed to do? And I have three answers, right? I always have
let's because that was really, I mean, in an
Yeah.
inflection point,
Yes.
you have to change the way you do your
You
work.
have to change it. You got to stay focused though on what matters. You don't stop doing things that you have to do to be open.
So these are urgent steps, and I want us to just stop for a second, right, and say we are where we are. It's going to present different challenges for our students and those that support them. So, Sarah, I am thinking, what do I do?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, you said three
Yep.
things.
Three things, right? And I'm going to explain first why you have to do them, right? So
Okay.
first, we're going to continue to welcome human beings to your campus, right? You're going to continue to, I mean, already, like these are just this is not the three things. This is just because you're going to continue to welcome human beings to your campus, because you're going to continue to say that they need to be able to learn, which means to be able to have to focus on school. And because you're going to continue to accept, as long as it's available, Title IV financial aid, which is to say, because you're going to put taxpayer dollars in there as a starting point, right? And some of them are going to take loans, which means the stakes are real, right? They're real for the taxpayers, they're real for the individuals. Then you have to figure out a way to make sure that students who need help to address their basic needs have at least some sort of help available to them. And you're not going to be able to rely on as many human beings, staff people to do that. So, number one, you have to go equip your faculty with the knowledge that they need to be able to fill in where the staff. Now, let me be clear. I am not turning faculty into social workers. I am not suggesting that faculty take the place of student affairs professionals. I am saying faculty have to be better sources of information. They need to have a level of awareness, both about where to direct students so they can find help, because our biggest issue right now is 50% of students who need help never find it.
Right.
Navigational. So you
Right.
need to, your frontline or your faculty, they're the ones in the classrooms. Even the part-time students interact with professors, right?
So it's a novel thought, though, Sarah, that a learning community would put learning up front, right, of equipping
Imagine,
people, right? So
right?
we've got to do a better job, no
Yeah, so
question.
we have to make sure, I mean, faculty cannot only know their subject area, they have to know some things. It's just like saying, hey, faculty, you need to know how to work on accommodations for students with disabilities. It just means, folks, when a student has this issue, this is where you're going to send them. And related to that, by the way, hey, faculty, there are a couple things you can do in your classroom so as to not accidentally alienate students and drive them out of our institution. Like the student who's late to class. Way too many professors think, oh, well, I think that's rude. I'm offended. I'm going to punish them. No, look, the person who's late to class tried to come to class. It would actually behoove you to give them a little bit of grace, recognize that you do not know why they're late to class.
Life can get
Life
in,
happens, right?
right.
So that's number one is empower and educate your faculty. And I got to say, I put a lot of time and effort into something called the Real College Curriculum, which is now out there for my nonprofit Believe in Students, because we got to empower a lot of people and we got to do it fast. So
Right.
it's online. Okay. Two, we need to engage our students more in this work. So peer navigation. Peer navigation. It works. Students talk to students, and students need to be empowered to help each other. That's why the Student Basic Needs Coalition is so focused on students working with students and training them and helping them, right?
Back in the old administration days, it's effective and efficient, right? It
Yeah. I
works.
mean, so those are really, I think, two really big things. And then, the third part is frankly to use tech in smarter ways. And I think there are those who might be surprised to hear me say it. I'm not suggesting we replace humans with tech. I'm saying if we can't afford humans, use smarter tech. So I'll give you a quick example. Look, if a student goes on our website at our college, they should be able to easily find their way to some sort of initial place where they can put in a little info and get directed to support. Too many schools are doing the equivalent of like Excel forms, right? Where somebody has to read it in order to figure out how to advise the student. This is a really good example of where AI fits.
Yeah.
It does. And there are products. I'm just going to say it. I'm not paid by them, but Qualtrics's XM platform does things that some of the other platforms just don't do. And I want to see more platforms. I just released a survey recently. The basic needs work is held up by the lack of good tech. And that doesn't make sense. And so if we're going to have a place where we have fewer staff, I do think that we have to, give people the tools so that if you have one staff member, they can serve a lot more people more efficiently.
Well, really, in all three of those elements, and you've written and advanced this all along, right? You really do need to know your students and know their needs.
Yeah. You have a
So,
responsibility to it. You can't assume it. You can't ignore it. It'll just come back to bite you. I mean, look, you're going to see, I don't know what it's going to be. You're going to see CDRs rise.
yep,
People,
yep,
are taking debt that they were never really able to repay, and you can't blame them for it.
right.
You're going to see, I mean, yes, we'll see lower retention, but I'm not just concerned about that. I'm talking about graduates who aren't okay. And if you do care that whether it's about employment or whether that they go on to a healthy, happy life and donate to your institution, none of that's going to happen if they spent college in pain.
Well, let me run two assumptions past you, right? Those institutions that have been structurally and kind of systemically built to extend privilege, they're going to be okay, right? Because,
Yeah, they're going to be fine. Sort of
right,
unfortunate. Well, unless we get involved. I mean, I have to say, I just published a piece in there's this new thing called Notice Perspectives. I don't know what it is, but anyway, just yesterday they published a forum of about 8 of us, Margaret Spellings and Linda Darling-Hammond, myself, and a couple of
nice.
others,
Yeah,
answering the question, "What's one thing that you would fix about higher ed?"
here we
And
go.
and what I said is I would redistribute resources. So I'm not asking America to spend more on higher ed. I'm saying stop wasting your money on institutions where we're not getting the bang for our buck. And I'm talking about those places that just take students who were born on third base and get them to home plate. They're not even getting them to home plate. They're going to home plate them themselves.
There's a lot of different ways to reallocate resources, right? Not only
Yes.
internally, but
Yeah.
the second is, and again, I will give you certainly inspirational credit, right? That the institutions that are sustainable are the ones that are going to serve their at-risk students best.
Yeah. And I'm going to give you another framing, just a little bit of a language twist on this. Okay.
Okay.
And it comes from my work by a woman named Jenny Brand at UCLA, who I have a ton of respect for. I think what we're really doing is we're taking unlikely graduates and turning them into graduates.
Mm,
So the people who actually get the biggest ROI from college are exactly the people who are the least likely currently to graduate. And whether that's a rural student, right?
totally.
Or
Yeah, totally.
whether that's a first gen student, right? And we can say they're at risk, but I worry sometimes that what we're not recognizing is these are brilliant people. I mean, they have so much going for them in many different ways. It's just that structurally, the odds are stacked against them because they don't have something, right? Or, maybe it's proximity to college, or maybe it's, right, a parent who knew how to guide them. And so if we invest in the unlikely graduates and turn them into graduates, will not only enhance social mobility, put that aside, we're just going to get a bigger bang for our buck overall as taxpayers.
No question. And they're within this inflection, right? We're going to have to do some things like reset cost and a lot of other things that can assist, right, on the front end. But I love that construct, right?
Yeah, I think we are hearing too many people, I think, thinking that we have to, because of whatever new federal rule, we have to abandon the idea that we would do any kind of efficient targeting of resources. And I don't agree with that. I don't think we have to do that. I think we have to be smarter about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, this compact that's circulating is just the wrong compact. I am all for more accountability in higher ed. I've advocated
Transparency, absolutely.
absolutely, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm not a fan of a lot of these different pieces, but just even if we just started with colleges get to publish what it costs to live off campus, and they get to make the number up.
Right.
Come on. It's the majority of the cost of attending college for the majority of people. Let's have some accountability around that living expense and let's take responsibility and have the Department of Education publish the prices, indexed to things like inflation and plug it in. Take that responsibility away from the colleges.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
more
straight line
needed.
to trust, right? I mean, that's one of the
Right.
quickest ways. And, I didn't want to leave us without thinking, Sarah, I spent a little time in the personalized learning space, and, we've had a language, struggle much more recently about terms like equity. And,
Mhm.
as you really think about meeting basic student needs, in its purest form, is equity is providing every student with the supports required to be successful.
Yeah,
I,
it's also just efficient,
Well,
right?
there
I
you go.
mean,
I mean, right.
I mean
There's
that's
all
I
kinds of wins,
right?
right?
I came up in Wisconsin, right, as a professional.
Yeah.
And we used to live in a world, and I'm hoping we can get back there, where whether the word that makes you do something is equity or whether the word that makes you do something is efficiency, you will look clear-headed about what the outcomes are, period, right?
There's
And you do it. And you don't
always,
just sit there and say, I don't like it because she said it, right?
well, and my good friend Rick Stasloff and I always said, the new business model is just making students more successful, right? I mean, however you want to frame it, right, in terms of, so you just used the word hope. You've driven Hope for College as a
Mhm.
uh, if we were thinking forward, I'd love to know and walk in your grandfather's shoes, because I would think
Mhm.
98 would be possible. But you have an opportunity to engage with a lot of younger professionals, those that are considering the field. I have intended to make this part of every conversation. What do you tell them
Mhm.
about the future? What do you think
It's,
and feel?
yeah. Well, first, I want to completely acknowledge it's become a very hard place to work. And I left the academy. I'm not really in it. I gave up tenure and I walked away because the place that it's become is I think so hard. That said, I certainly hope that other people don't all do what I did.
Yeah.
I felt like I had done what I could personally give of myself after that, after 20 plus years. Um, I hope that people understand that there's so much worth and so much value in that work, right? That no matter what, you cannot look for external validation right now if you work in higher education. You cannot, do not listen to what the media or the
It's
president
all
says.
noise, right?
It's all noise. It's very clear that there's value in higher ed. I think we're actually giving too much air to that conversation because the value's not in question. It's a matter of scientific fact. The value's there. What's not there is agreement about who gets to have that value. And there's a lot of fear about how the world changes if those unlikely graduates become graduates. And that is where I would want the younger people to focus, which is if you want to make a difference, then get in there and try to do things differently, right? If you're going to go into student affairs with a focus on literally trying to help the people become part of the institution who are the least likely to automatically feel part of the institution. Social cohesion activities are not it, right? Um, Stop thinking about residence halls and start thinking about how do you really create rich experiences for students as they live off campus? Because that's the wave of the future. It's this model, this leaving everything behind to go to college model and going young. I think we are going to leave that behind. I'm not actually that upset about that.
You
You
know,
know,
and the,
you can learn a lot.
your
Yeah.
three tenets are so powerful for not only meeting basic needs, but certainly if we align right students and faculty, campuses to kind of solve our own community's wicked problems, things like housing and food scarcity would be at the top of the list for.
Oh,
uh,
there's no question. There's no question. I'm so proud of the fact that we're seeing unions, we're seeing faculty unions arguing for students' basic needs and making it part of their contract negotiations. Like
Yeah,
Community College of Philadelphia, the AFT-led union is literally fighting right now for free transportation for students. And let me be clear, it's a learning issue, right? It's because students are late to class and students miss class because they can't get there, right? And they can't afford even the bus pass. So, and the same thing's true with childcare. And that just reminds us that this whole thing is about faculty and students together in an enterprise that I like to think of as the administrators as facilitating.
right.
You're the back end, the front end of the whole thing should be students and their educators.
Clear the path, right? And
Yes, clear the path and empower the students, by the way, to also be educators. Like, if you don't know what needs to happen on your campus, go ask the people doing the teaching and learning,
and
which are the
then
students and the teachers.
as you point out, then go repair the world, right? Together.
Tikkun olam. That's tikkun olam in Hebrew. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we got a lot of repairing to do. And I do hear that sometimes my grandfather is not as hopeful, and I feel for him, right? Because
Yeah.
it's hard when we've created, those of us with children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, what are we leaving people? And that to me is what a question we should all be asking ourselves. You can't just exit.
A
You're
lot of
leaving people
similarities, I think,
behind.
between your granddad and my dad. He would ask the question sometimes, and he's been gone quite a while, Sarah, if his
Yeah,
preaching did any good,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they all it's a responsibility, and we've shared that, right? And like you said, you're not in
Yeah.
the academy, but you are available, willing, and not just encouraging, but I really believe hopeful to do that. How do people engage with you?
Yeah, so look, I got outside the academy so I could do more with the academy. Let me put it that way,
There you
right?
go. Right.
I think that unfortunately I learned that sometimes institutions only want you to be about that institution. And I don't know how to I don't pledge allegiance to institutions, right? My allegiance is to students and to making better lives for students anywhere. So the way that I work now is I partner with all kinds of folks. I partner with the private sector, I partner with colleges and universities, I partner with nonprofits, I partner with students. And what I try to do is try to help people address the stickiest problems. You call them wicked problems, right? I'm the girl you call when you want to try to do something that you haven't been able to do before. And I will do it in non-traditional ways, right? Of course, I think that's pretty clear. If you just start typing my name into Google, my name will come right up, and you can hit my website. And I'm very open to ideas right now from folks and input on what could I do that would help us to find a different way forward, to get to 2030, to figure out what that looks like. Um, and I am trying to remain open to all of it, which is hard. I'm doing a lot of yoga, by the way, in addition to boxing these days, because it helps you stay open.
Yeah. Well, and I think my encouragement is what's next is going to be exciting and challenging, but an opportunity, right, to paint that
Yeah.
canvas a little differently. And Sarah, I, I I'm so appreciative to you and your scholarship and your voice. I have been shaped by it. I had a real hope that you'd be one of the first conversations that would have about the future, because I anticipated that you would be focused on what's most important, right? And that's our students.
Oh,
And
I'm so grateful for the invitation and also grateful that, listen, a lot of people can talk, but not everybody can listen, and you actually listened.
well, we share so many commonalities, right? And I think we're both going to have another conversation, and I imagine our opportunities to collaborate. And we're in all of this together, right? So it's these thought partnerships that I hope we can all leverage to what's next, and that'll be
Yeah.
exciting. So, Sarah, I want to say thank you. Thanks for
Thank
taking the
you.
time, and
Yeah.
we will stay in touch.
Sounds good.
All right, take care.